Chapter 10. Exposure Time. Maya stood in her darkroom, watching images slowly emerge from chemical baths. She'd spent the day, her night, documenting the hotel's hidden spaces, using Alexandra's special film to capture what digital sensors missed. Now, faces gazed up at her from the developing trays, each print revealing layers of the Monteleone's supernatural life. The images should have been triumphant. Instead, every photograph felt like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed yet. Here was Alexandra in the library, his fever warmth actually visible as a golden haze around his form. There he stood on the grand staircase, midnight eyes holding centuries of careful solitude. Each shot showed him more clearly than any digital camera could capture, making his eternal nature impossible to deny, making it impossible to ignore what loving her would cost him. The hotel's presence hovered anxiously as Maya lifted the latest print from its chemical bath. This one showed them together, caught in an unguarded moment by whatever force operated her grandmother's Rolleiflex when she wasn't looking. Alexandra's expression as he gazed at her made her heart crack, wonder and fear and a hunger deeper than blood.
"I'll destroy him,"
she whispered to the dark room's red-lit shadows.
"Not now, not soon, but eventually. Time will take me, and he'll be left alone, like his mother."
The hotel's response was immediate and agitated. Drafts of warm air tried to dry her tears, while the chemical trays rippled with obvious disagreement. But Maya turned away from its comfort, her photographer's eye catalyzing every detail of her inevitable betrayal. She was 32. With luck and good health, she might have another 50 years, 60 at most. A heartbeat to an immortal. A blink of an eye to someone who remembered when photography was new, when cities were first rising from desert sands. The image in the developing tray shifted somehow, though she knew that was impossible. Now it showed her as she'd been at 25, when she'd first started her career. Another print revealed her at 28, when she'd accepted Jason's ring. A third showed her as she was now, her face already showing the first subtle signs of age that her camera never missed.
"Stop it,"
she told the hotel sharply.
"You're not helping."
But the images kept coming, developing themselves in defiance of chemical logic. Maya at 35, 40, 50, each shot beautiful in its way, but undeniably mortal. And in every one, Alexandra remained unchanging, his eternal youth emphasizing her steady march toward death. Maya snatched the prints from their baths, meaning to destroy them, but her hands shook, scattering photographs across the darkroom floor. They fell like autumn leaves, like memories, like promises she could never keep. The hotel's distress manifested in flickering lights and whispered drafts. Maya felt its attempt to comfort her, to show her some truth she wasn't ready to see. But all she could focus on was the evidence before her, time's inevitable progress, mortality's unwavering march, love's devastating mathematics. Her grandmother's Rolleiflex sat accusingly on a nearby shelf, its twin lenses reflecting the red safe light like knowing eyes. Maya remembered the old woman's stories now with horrible clarity, tales of the Monteleone's mysteries that had always ended with a sort of wistful acceptance. Had she known? Had she seen this world of eternal beings and chosen to remain apart?
"Ms. Richardson."
A voice from the doorway, one of the renovation crew looking concerned.
"The historical consultant is asking for you. Something about the third floor's documentation?"
Maya closed her eyes, letting the weight of inevitability settle around her shoulders. Every moment she spent with Alexandra now felt like a debt accumulating interest. Happiness borrowed against future grief.
"Tell him I'll be there shortly,"
she managed, her voice steady despite everything crumbling inside her.
"I just need to finish up here."
The worker left, but Maya remained frozen among her scattered prophecies. The hotel's presence pressed against her awareness, trying to show her something in the chemical-scented darkness. But all she could see was Alexandra's mother, choosing eternal sleep rather than face immortality alone. All she could see was Alexandra, centuries from now, laying roses on her grave. The golden-veined rose in her bag pulsed with warmth, trying to remind her of adaptation, of evolution, of love's power to transform. But transformation couldn't change the mathematics of mortality, couldn't alter the fact that every moment they spent together was both a gift and a curse, joy now in exchange for devastation later. Maya gathered the scattered photographs with shaking hands, each image burning into her memory like brands. The hotel tried to help, but she waved away its assistance. This evidence of time's cruelty was her burden to bear. She found herself touching the marks Alexandra's lips had left on her neck, remembering his careful passion, his desperate restraint. Even in desire, he protected her. Even in hunger, he put her safety first. How could she do less for him? The dark room door swung open of its own accord, the hotel's unsubtle way of telling her she couldn't hide forever. Maya straightened her shoulders, schooling her features into professional composure. She had a job to do, documentation to complete. The rest would have to wait until she found the strength to break both their hearts. Alexandra's fever warmth radiated down the corridor as she approached the third floor, calling to her blood like a siren's song. Maya's steps slowed, each one feeling heavier than the last. The photographs in her bag burned like evidence of future crimes, while the golden-veined rose pulsed with desperate warmth. She couldn't do this, couldn't face him with the weight of mortality pressing against her skin, couldn't meet those midnight eyes knowing every shared glance was one step closer to leaving him alone. Maya turned away from the third floor, her feet carrying her toward the front entrance. The hotel's presence surged around her in alarm, doors slamming shut in her path. But Maya had learned its rhythms too well. She found the spaces between its protections, the gaps in its eternal walls. She made it as far as the lobby before his voice stopped her.
Maya.
She closed her eyes, letting his fever warmth wash over her one last time. Then she squared her shoulders and turned to face everything she couldn't bear to destroy.
We need to talk,
she said softly.
about time, about mathematics, about debts that can never be repaid.
The Monteleone's lobby felt vast and empty, though Maya knew the hotel was listening with every brick and beam. Alexandre stood at the foot of the grand staircase, his fever warmth radiating like a dying sun. When he took a step toward her, she held up a hand, needing distance to say what had to be said.
I've been developing the photographs.
She began, her voice steadier than she felt.
The ones on your special film. They show everything so clearly, too clearly. Time, aging, mortality.
She swallowed hard.
Mathematics.
Mathematics?
His tone was gentle, which somehow made it worse.
50 years, if I'm lucky. 60 at the absolute most. That's what I have to offer. A heartbeat to someone who's lived for centuries. A blink of an eye to someone who remembers when photography was new.
Maya.
No, please, let me finish.
She laid the photographs on a nearby table, arranging them in chronological order, her past, present, and projected future displayed in merciless detail.
I saw your mother, Alexandra. I saw what grief did to her. The thought of doing that to you?
Her voice cracked.
The thought of leaving you alone for centuries. Of becoming just another loss you have to carry.
The hotel's lights dimmed in sympathy, casting shadows that looked like tears on the walls. Alexandra remained perfectly still, that preternatural stillness that marked him as something other than human.
Every moment we spend together,
Maya continued, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat.
every smile, every touch. They're not just memories we're making. They're weapons I'm forging against your future self. The closer we become, the more it will hurt when time takes me away.
And you think distance now will hurt less?
His voice carried centuries of careful control, but she heard the pain beneath.
You think pulling away while we both still breathe will somehow make the eventual separation easier?
I think
Maya's hands found the golden-veined rose, its warmth now feeling like an accusation.
love that deep, that eternal, it's not meant for mortals. We're meant for briefer flames, for loves that can end together.
Alexandra moved then, too fast for human eyes to track. One moment he stood by the stairs, the next he was before her, his fever warmth wrapping around her like a farewell embrace.
You think I haven't considered this?
He asked softly.
Haven't measured every possibility, calculated every heartbeat, weighed every moment of joy against future grief.
His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't felt falling.
Haven't spent every night since meeting you trying to find the mathematics that would make loving you less terrifying?
Maya leaned into his touch despite herself, letting his impossible heat burn away her tears.
And did you find those mathematics?
No,
His smile held more sorrow than she'd ever seen.
because love isn't mathematics, ma chérie. It's chemistry, physics, art, all the sciences and mysteries combined into something that defies calculation.
But your mother?
Chose her path,
His fever warmth flared as he pressed his forehead to hers.
just as I choose mine, with full knowledge of the cost, full acceptance of the price.
I can't do that to you. Can't bear the thought of you alone, laying roses on my grave for centuries.
And I can't bear the thought of losing you before I must,
His voice broke slightly.
of watching you walk away while we both still have time.
The hotel's presence wrapped around them like a mother trying to hold her family together. But Maya forced herself to step back, breaking contact with Alexandra's fever warmth.
That's exactly why I have to go.
She whispered.
Because it will only hurt more the longer I stay. Because every moment together is another memory that will haunt you. Another regret to carry through endless nights.
Maya, please!
I've seen what that kind of loss does to your kind.
She gathered the photographs with shaking hands, unable to meet his eyes.
I've seen your mother's endless sleep, seen how grief can break even an eternal heart. I can't.
The words dissolved into tears she couldn't control. Alexandra reached for her, eternal instincts warring with her obvious need for distance. The hotel's lights flickered frantically, its presence radiating distress.
I understand.
He said finally, his voice carrying the weight of centuries.
I don't agree, but I understand.
Those quiet words broke something in Maya's chest. She turned and fled, her feet carrying her through the hotel's twisting corridors as tears blurred her vision. Behind her, she felt Alexandra's fever warmth fade like a setting sun, taking all hope of warmth with it. The hotel tried to guide her, doors opening to offer sanctuary, but Maya ran blindly until she reached her suite. Only then did she let herself collapse, photographs scattering across the floor like fallen leaves, like broken promises, like all the moments they would never share. Through her tears, she saw the images changing again, showing not just her future aging, but all the joy they could have had along the way. The hotel's presence curled around her like a mother's comfort, trying to show her another path. But all Maya could see was Alexandra's mother, choosing endless sleep rather than face eternity alone. All she could feel was the weight of responsibility, the devastating knowledge that every moment of happiness now would become an instrument of torture later. The golden-veined rose fell from her bag, its petals darkening as if in mourning. Maya curled around it like a wound, letting her tears fall as the hotel's gaslights dimmed to their lowest setting. Outside her windows, the quarter's bells began to toll midnight. Each chime felt like another nail in the coffin of possibility, another mathematical proof that some loves were too devastating to pursue. Some distances, she was learning, hurt more than any closeness ever could. Packing felt like dismantling her own heart piece by piece. Maya moved through her suite in a daze, gathering equipment and clothes while trying not to look at any of the thoughtful touches the hotel had added. The perfectly arranged lighting for morning editing, the vintage camera display shelves, the cosy reading nook positioned to catch the evening sun. The hotel fought her every step of the way. Drawers stuck, closet doors refused to open, her clothes seemed to tangle themselves deliberately. Even her camera bags appeared to have developed impossible knots in their straps.
Please,
She whispered to the agitated building.
don't make this harder than it already is.
A warm draft dried the tears on her cheeks, but the hotel's presence felt like a child begging her not to go. When she reached for her grandmother's Rolleiflex, the shelf actually moved away from her hand.
I have to.
She told the empty room.
You know I do. You've seen what grief does to them.
The lights flickered in obvious disagreement. Maya's laptop suddenly opened itself, displaying the photographs from the darkroom. But now they showed different moments, all the joy and laughter she was choosing to sacrifice, all the beauty they could have shared despite time's cruel mathematics.
That's not fair.
Maya closed the laptop with trembling hands.
You can't just show me what I want. This isn't about want. It's about necessity, about protection.
The hotel's response was to manifest a series of doors, each one leading to a different memory. The ballroom where they'd first danced, the courtyard where he'd almost kissed her, the winter garden where they'd shared impossible coffee. Maya turned away from them all, her heart cracking with each rejected invitation. She'd almost finished packing when she found the rose, that first golden-veined bloom that had survived when all the others turned to ash. It lay on her pillow like an accusation, its impossible petals now traced with what looked like tears of light. Maya reached for it automatically, then stopped herself. Better to leave it. Better to sever all connections to this world of eternal loves and devastating losses. The hotel dimmed its lights to their lowest setting, as if it too were crying. Maya shouldered her bags, taking one last look at the suite that had somehow become more home to her than anywhere else she'd lived.
Take care of him,
she whispered to the grieving building.
Help him understand. Help him forget.
The hotel's presence surged around her in obvious protest, but Maya was already moving. Each step away from the suite felt like walking through molasses, her body fighting the separation even as her mind insisted on its necessity. She made it to the lobby before her strength wavered. The grand staircase loomed before her, its brass fixtures gleaming in the gaslight like tears. For a moment, she thought she saw Alexandra's reflection in the metalwork. That impossible grace, that careful distance, that hungry devotion that had somehow broken through both their walls. Maya forced herself to look away, to keep walking. The hotel's front doors stuck firmly shut, requiring all her strength to push them open. As she stepped through, she felt something snap, like a thread breaking, like a heart shattering, like the severing of possibilities that could never be reclaimed. The quarter's night air felt wrong against her skin, too warm and too cold all at once. She missed Alexandra's fever warmth with a physical ache, missed the hotel's shy affection like a lost limb. But she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, measuring her steps away from everything she'd dared to want. Her temporary hotel room felt aggressively normal when she finally reached it. No gas lamps, no shifting shadows, no presence welcoming her home. Just generic art on beige walls, standard hotel furniture arranged with corporate precision. Maya set down her bags and finally let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She sank onto the bland comforter, wrapping her arms around herself as sobs tore through her chest. She cried for the future they could have had, for all the moments now lost to time's cruel arithmetic. Cried for Alexandra's careful acceptance, for the way he'd let her go despite his eternal strength. Cried for the hotel's distress, for the golden-veined rose she'd left behind, for everything beautiful and impossible she'd walked away from. Her phone buzzed, Jen's name lighting up the screen. Maya silenced it without checking the message. She couldn't deal with the contract yet, couldn't face explaining why she was abandoning the project of a lifetime. The generic hotel room's shadows held no comfort, its silence feeling dead rather than anticipatory. Maya found herself straining to feel the Monteleone's presence, to catch even an echo of Alexandra's fever warmth. But there was nothing. Just the hum of modern air conditioning and the distant sounds of tourist revelry. She curled onto her side, still fully dressed, and watched darkness gather in corners that held no secrets. Her tears had run dry, leaving behind a hollow ache that felt like withdrawal from something more addictive than love. The quarter's bells told 3, each chime marking another hour of their separation. Maya pressed her fingers to the marks Alexandra's lips had left on her neck, remembering his careful passion, his desperate restraint. Even in desire, he had protected her. Even in hunger, he had put her needs first. She'd done the same for him, she told herself. Protected him from future grief, from the devastation of loving something as fragile as a mortal heart. Better to break both their hearts now than leave him to face centuries alone. Better to walk away while they both still breathed, than become another eternal regret in his endless night. The words felt hollow even in her own mind, but Maya clung to them like a shield against doubt. She had done the right thing, the necessary thing, the mathematically correct thing. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her mortal life? Dawn found her still awake, watching sunlight creep across generic hotel carpet. Somewhere across the quarter, Alexandra would be seeking his daily rest, his fever warmth fading as night released its hold. Maya turned away from the window, unable to bear even that tenuous connection. She had chosen this separation, this protection, this mathematical certainty of loss over love. Now she just had to learn to live with the consequences of being right. Chapter 11. Negative space dawn painted the French Quarter in shades of pearl and gold, but Maya saw everything through a lens of loss. She'd walked all night, unable to bear the generic hotel room's emptiness, letting her feet carry her through streets that felt haunted by possibility's ghost. Le Maison Violet looked different in daylight, the purple door now a faded lavender, the brass musical note in the cobblestones tarnished and ordinary. Maya traced it with her toe, remembering how Alexandra's fever warmth had wrapped around her as they'd entered that first night. To her surprise, the door opened at her touch. The club's interior stopped her in her tracks. Gone were the gas lamps and vintage furnishings, replaced by fluorescent lights and modern cafe tables. Where the antique bar had stood, a coffee counter dispensed espresso to early morning customers. Even the stage looked wrong. Smaller, newer, stripped of its midnight magic.
We're different things to different people.
Evangeline's voice came from behind her, still smoky despite the hour.
Rather like someone else, you know.
Maya turned to find the waitress looking exactly as she had that night. Beaded dress catching impossible light, ageless beauty unmarred by morning's harsh revelation. But now Maya noticed other details. The way shadows moved wrong around her, how light seemed to bend in her presence.
Coffee?
Evangeline gestured to a corner table.
Or something stronger? Dawn's a tricky time for those of us who walk between worlds.
Maya followed numbly, sinking into a chair that felt both modern and antique, depending on how she looked at it. The cafe's other patrons seemed normal enough, tourists and locals alike starting their days with caffeine and beignets. But occasionally, when she looked directly at them, their faces shifted into something older, stranger.
Stop analyzing everything?
Evangeline set down 2 cups of something that smelled like neither coffee nor alcohol, yet somehow reminded Maya of both.
That's half your problem, isn't it? Always trying to capture the perfect shot instead of living in the moment?
I'm trying to protect him.
Maya said, though she hadn't meant to speak at all. Evangeline's knowing smile held centuries.
By making choices for him? Deciding what his eternal heart can and cannot bear?
She sipped her drink, leaving traces of light on the rim.
Tell me, did you ask him what he wanted? Or did you do what you always do? Frame the shot exactly as you think it should be, without letting your subject have any say?
Maya stared into her cup, watching patterns form and dissolve like chemical swirls in developing fluid.
I saw his mother,
She whispered.
saw what grief did to her. The thought of doing that to him.
The thought of being that important to someone?
Evangeline's voice turned gentle.
Of being loved that deeply, that eternally?
The thought of leaving him alone.
The words burst out louder than Maya intended, making several patrons turn their heads. When she looked directly at them, she caught glimpses of other eras in their clothes, other centuries in their eyes.
Ah,
Evangeline sat back, beaded dress chiming softly.
so it's not really about protecting him. It's about protecting yourself from the responsibility of being truly loved. from the weight of meaning that much to someone eternal.
Maya opened her mouth to protest, then closed it slowly. The drink in her cup shifted colours, showing her reflection from different angles. Professional Maya with her camera shield, romantic Maya daring to dance with a vampire, scared Maya running from possibilities too vast to capture.
He deserves better.
She managed finally.
Someone who won't leave him. Someone eternal, like him.
Evangeline's laugh held notes from every jazz song ever played.
Oh, Cherie, you think eternity is what makes love worthy? You think time is what gives meaning to the heart?
She gestured around the club, and Maya watched reality shift like double-exposed film. The cafe and jazz club existed simultaneously now, modern life and ageless mystery sharing the same space, neither more real than the other.
Look around you.
Evangeline continued.
Really look, what do you see?
Maya forced herself to look with a photographer's eye, to really see what the club was showing her. Tourists and ageless beings shared tables, their worlds overlapping like transparencies. Coffee steam and gas lamplight twined together, neither cancelling the other out. Modern jazz from hidden speakers harmonised with phantom piano music, creating something entirely new.
It's not either or.
She said slowly.
It's both. All of it, existing together.
Just as you're both mortal and eternal?
Evangeline agreed.
The moments you capture, the beauty you preserve, those are eternal things, Cherie. The way you see the world, the truth you show through your lens, those things will outlive any physical form.
Maya thought of the photographs in her bag, of all the moments she'd captured with Alexandra's special film. Each one preserved forever, showing truths digital sensors couldn't capture.
But eventually,
She started.
Eventually the sun will burn out and the stars will fade.
Evangeline interrupted.
Eventually even vampires will end. But that's not why we love, is it? We don't measure feeling by its duration. We measure it by its depth.
The club's light shifted again, and Maya caught a glimpse of herself reflected in an impossible angle. Not as she was now, but as she could be. Mortal, but unafraid. Temporary, but eternal in the things that mattered.
he tried to tell me this.
She said softly.
That love isn't mathematics.
And yet you insisted on calculating loss instead of measuring gain.
Evangeline's dress caught light that shouldn't have existed, scattering it like stars.
Tell me, when you're photographing something beautiful, do you refuse to capture it because the moment will end? Do you turn away from perfect light because shadows will eventually fall?
Maya's hands found her camera bag, fingers tracing the edges of her grandmother's Rolleiflex. She thought of all the moments she'd captured, light and shadow, joy and grief, beginnings and endings. Each one valuable not for its duration, but for its truth.
I've been a fool, haven't I?
No more than most who face eternity's mirror.
Evangeline stood, her movements flowing between modern and timeless.
The question is, what will you do about it now?
Maya looked down at her cup, watching her reflection fragment and reform.
I don't know if he'll forgive me. If the hotel will even let me back in.
Ah, Cherie.
Evangeline's smile held secrets older than the quarter itself.
That's the beautiful thing about eternal hearts. They have endless capacity for second chances.
She glided away, beads chiming softly, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and a drink that tasted like possibility. Around her, La Maison Violet continued its impossible dance between worlds, showing her what she should have seen all along. Some things didn't need to last forever to be eternal. Some loves were worthy precisely because they were precious, temporary, irreplaceable. Maya stood, gathering her courage with her camera bag. The sun had fully risen now, painting the quarter in colours that belonged to neither day nor night but something in between. Rather like her heart, caught between mortal and eternal, finally ready to stop counting time and start measuring depth instead. Maya stepped out of La Maison Violet into morning light that suddenly felt too harsh, too exposing. The club's door closed behind her with a final sounding click, and she realised Evangeline's presence had vanished like mist at dawn. She needed to think, to plan how she would approach Alexandra. Walking away had been easy compared to finding the words to come back. Her hands found her grandmother's Rolleiflex, its familiar weight usually a comfort.
Don't move.
The voice behind her carried that same clinical coldness from the alley.
And don't bother calling for help. Your supernatural friends are all safely asleep at this hour.
Maya's fingers tightened on her camera as a shadow fell across her, wrong-angled, mechanical in its precision. Something in her bag turned ice-cold against her hip, as if the very absence of the golden-veined rose she'd left behind had become a physical sensation of warning.
The famous photographer,
the hunter said, moving into view with unnatural grace. Up close, Maya could see what had bothered her about his movements that night. He moved like someone who had studied vampires too closely, who had learned to mimic their predatory grace, but couldn't quite capture their fluid nature.
the one who sees too much.
He looked deceptively ordinary in daylight. Pressed suit, polished shoes, the kind of face that belonged in corporate boardrooms. Only his eyes betrayed him, flat and cold as gunmetal. The weapon in his hand gleamed with blessed silver.
I'm just documenting the renovation.
Maya said carefully, already knowing it wouldn't matter.
With that,
He nodded at her Rolleiflex.
that's his film in there, isn't it? Special emulsion, designed to capture what shouldn't be seen, to preserve secrets that should stay buried.
Maya took a step back, but he matched it with mechanical precision.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
His smile never reached those metallic eyes.
Then perhaps we should develop it together, after you've helped me with a more pressing matter.
The quarter was waking around them, but Maya noticed how pedestrians' eyes slid past without seeing, how tourists changed direction without knowing why. The hunter's presence carved out a pocket of negative space, a blind spot in the mortal world.
He won't come.
She said, trying to keep her voice steady.
We're not...
Oh, but he will.
The hunter's certainty sent chills down her spine.
That's the beautiful thing about his kind. They're so predictably protective of their thralls, their pets, their little mortal distractions.
I'm not his thrall.
No.
That horrible smile widened.
Then why do you carry his roses? Why do you use his film? Why do you bear his mark on your skin?
Maya's hand flew to her neck where Alexandra's lips had left their fever-warm impression. The hunter's laugh held no humour.
You see? Even now you think of him, long for him. But don't worry, he'll come for you. They always do. And when he does...
The silver gun caught morning light, transforming it into something deadly. Maya saw her chance slipping away with each passing second. She could run, but his unnatural speed would catch her. Could scream, but no one would hear through his manufactured blind spot. Instead, she raised her camera. The Rolleiflex's flash blazed with impossible brightness. Alexandra's special film reacting to blessed silver in ways neither of them had anticipated. The hunter staggered, momentarily blinded, his mechanical grace faltering. Maya ran. She made it 3 steps before something hit her from behind. Not a bullet, but some kind of blessed net that burned where it touched her skin. She fell hard, the Rolleiflex clattering away across cobblestones.
Interesting.
The hunter said, looming over her.
The film responds to you, as if you were one of them. As if their corruption has already begun to transform you.
Maya struggled against the net, but each movement made the blessed silver burn deeper.
You're insane.
No, I'm necessary.
He knelt beside her, clinical interest in his metal eyes.
Someone has to maintain the balance, has to prevent their kind from corrupting more innocent lives.
Through tears of pain, Maya saw him retrieve her camera, handling it with careful disdain.
Such a shame. You had real talent before he twisted it to his purposes, before he made you see things that should stay hidden.
I saw those things on my own.
Maya gritted out.
long before I met him.
Something flickered in those flat eyes. Not quite emotion, but close.
Then you understand why this is necessary, why some secrets should stay in shadow.
He pulled out a phone, its surface etched with symbols that hurt Maya's eyes to look at.
Now then, let's compose a message for your vampire. Something to ensure he arrives appropriately motivated.
Maya felt a sudden warmth pulse through her, not from any physical object, but from something deeper, as if her connection to Alexandra's world itself was surging with defiance. Then the hunter was lifting her, the blessed net sending waves of agony through her body.
Don't worry.
He said, his voice still horribly pleasant.
This will all be over soon, one way or another.
The last thing Maya saw before unconsciousness claimed her was her grandmother's rolleiflex lying broken on ancient cobblestones, Alexandra's special films spooled out like silver tears in the morning light. Her last thought was of dark eyes and fever warmth, of a love she'd pushed away to protect him, only to become the very thing that might destroy him after all. Then darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. Maya woke to find herself in what appeared to be an abandoned church, blessed silver chains replacing the net, but burning no less fiercely against her skin. Morning light filtered through stained glass, casting colours that seemed to judge her with their holy fire. The hunter sat in a nearby pew, methodically cleaning a collection of weapons that made her photographer's eye want to look anywhere else. Each one gleamed with unnatural brightness, blessed silver catching the light in ways that hurt to witness.
Ah, good.
His voice still carried that terrible pleasantness.
I was hoping we could have a proper conversation before he arrives. About corruption, about salvation, about the choices that lead innocent souls into darkness.
The only darkness here is yours,
Maya said, though the words cost her as the chains tightened in response. The hunter sighed like a disappointed teacher.
You see? Already, your mind twists truth into shadows. Already, you defend creatures that should have stayed buried in humanity's nightmares.
He set aside his current weapon, something that looked like a cross between a gun and a crossbow.
Tell me, has he fed from you yet? Forced his tainted blood past your lips?
What? No.
Maya tried to pull away as he approached, clinical interest in his metallic eyes.
No?
He gripped her chin, turning her head to examine the marks on her neck.
Yet you bear his touch. His fever warmth has already begun changing you at the cellular level. I can see it in the way your skin reacts to blessed silver, the way your eyes have started to adapt to darkness.
You're insane.
I'm observant.
He released her chin but remained too close, studying her like a specimen under glass.
Like you. That's what drew his attention, isn't it? Your ability to see what others miss. But there's a difference between us, Ms. Richardson. I see the corruption for what it is. You.
He smiled that horrible empty smile.
You've let it seduce you into thinking monsters can love.
Alexandra isn't...
Alexander?
The hunter's laugh held no warmth.
Is that what he calls himself now? Did he tell you his real name? The one he bore when he first turned from the light? When he first chose to become this abomination against nature?
Maya said nothing, but something must have shown in her face because the hunter's expression turned almost gentle.
You see? Already you question. Already doubt creeps in. Tell me, what else has he hidden? What other secrets lurk behind that carefully constructed facade of nobility?
He turned away, moving to a table laden with what looked like scientific equipment.
They're very good at that, you know. At playing human, at pretending they remember what it means to feel real emotion. But it's all performance, all careful calculation. Even their supposed love is just another form of hunger.
You're wrong.
Maya's voice shook, but not with doubt, with fury.
I've seen real emotion in him, real pain, real love.
Pain.
The hunter selected something from his collection, a syringe filled with liquid silver.
Of course you have. They're excellent at manufacturing tragedy, at creating the perfect scenario to draw in sympathetic souls.
He turned back to her, that clinical interest sharpening.
Let me guess. He showed you some great loss, some eternal grief he carries nobly through the centuries?
Maya thought of Alexandra's mother, of the tomb's perfect stillness, and something must have shifted in her expression because the hunter nodded in satisfaction.
You see, all carefully arranged, all designed to draw you deeper into their web of shadows and secrets.
He moved closer, syringe catching unholy light.
The good news is, it's not too late. The corruption hasn't fully taken hold. I can still save you.
I don't need saving.
They all say that at first.
He studied the syringe with scientific detachment.
The corruption blinds them to their own degradation, makes them think the monsters truly care, truly love.
His empty eyes met hers.
Tell me, did he explain what would happen to you? How his fever warmth would slowly change your very nature? How each touch brings you closer to becoming like him?
Maya thought of Alexandra's careful distance, his desperate restraint. How even in passion he had protected her.
He would never...
Force it on you directly? No, they're subtler than that now. They let it happen gradually. Let their victims think they're choosing the darkness. Let them believe it's love transforming them rather than corruption.
He set the syringe aside, selecting instead what looked like medical monitoring equipment.
The good news is, I can end this before the change becomes irreversible. Can free you from whatever compulsion he's woven around your mind. All you have to do is help me end him.
Never.
Maya pulled against the chains despite the pain, seeing now what true monsters looked like. They wore pressed suits and polished shoes, spoke with clinical precision about murder, and thought their hatred was holy.
Ah, well.
The hunter's smile never reached his eyes.
Fortunately, your cooperation isn't required. He'll come for you. They always do. Their pride won't let them abandon a claimed thrall. And when he does,
He gestured to his array of blessed weapons.
I'll free you both. Him from his cursed existence, you from the corruption he's begun.
He turned away, checking something on equipment Maya couldn't quite see.
Rest while you can, Miss Richardson. Dawn is fading, and night will bring either your salvation or your damnation. Though, really,
His laugh echoed through the abandoned church like empty bells.
for creatures like him, is there any difference?
Maya said nothing, but in her heart she felt something crystallize, a truth deeper than fear, stronger than doubt. She had walked away to protect Alexandra from future grief, only to become the instrument of present danger. She had calculated the mathematics of mortality while ignoring the simple algebra of love. The hunter moved through his terrible collection, making preparations with mechanical precision. But Maya barely saw him now. All she could think of was Alexandre, hoping desperately that for once he wouldn't try to protect her, that he would understand the trap and stay away. Even as she thought it, she knew he wouldn't. Love wasn't mathematics, after all. It was chemistry, physics, art, all the sciences and mysteries combined into something that defied calculation. Something worth dying for. Something worth living for. If only they got the chance. Chapter 12. Perfect Light. The hunter was explaining something about blessed silver's purifying properties when the church's stained glass windows exploded inward. Maya caught a glimpse of Alexandra's form silhouetted against the dying sun, causing him obvious discomfort as it seared his sensitive eyes, but apparently less important than reaching her.
Right on schedule.
The hunter said, that terrible smile never wavering as he raised his weapon.
They're so predictable when it comes to their possessions.
The world dissolved into chaos. Alexandra moved faster than human eyes could track, his fever warmth radiating fury. But the hunter had prepared well. Blessed silver nets dropped from the ceiling, automated weapons tracked supernatural movement with mechanical precision. Maya struggled against her chains, watching Alexandra dance between silver bullets with impossible grace, despite the sunlight that must have been turning his supernatural vision into pure agony. But she could see the cost. Each near miss left traces of silver light in his wake, each blessed weapon forcing him further from her.
You see how he moves?
The hunter's clinical voice cut through the chaos as he circled behind Maya.
Pure predator. Pure monster. Is this really what you want to become?
Alexandra's eyes met Maya's across the battle, midnight dark with something deeper than hunger. Then a blessed bullet caught him in the shoulder, silver light blazing through eternal flesh.
No!
Maya threw herself against the chains, ignoring how they burned. She had to reach him, had to stop this, had to... The hunter's gun pressed against her temple, stopping her cold.
Stay still,
he said pleasantly.
This will all be over soon.
Alexandra froze mid-motion, his expression transforming from fury to fear. The hunter's smile widened.
You see? They can be trained. They can be controlled. All it takes is the right motivation.
He shifted the gun slightly, letting blessed silver touch Maya's skin. She couldn't help the small sound of pain that escaped.
Let her go.
Or what?
The hunter's laugh held no humour.
You'll kill me. Prove exactly what kind of monster you are. Show her your true nature.
My true nature?
Something shifted in Alexandra's voice, something ancient and terrible.
My true nature is what keeps me from tearing you apart slowly. What makes me offer you one last chance to release her unharmed.
The hunter's grip tightened painfully in Maya's hair.
Your true nature is corruption, is hunger, is the slow destruction of everything pure and human.
The gun pressed harder against her temple.
I'm saving her from becoming like you, from the taint you've already begun spreading through her blood.
Maya caught Alexandra's eye, saw the moment he understood what she was about to do. She took a deep breath, praying she was right about what she'd learned in the dark room.
You want to see his true nature?
She asked the hunter. Then she threw herself forward, directly into the blessed silver chains. Several things happened at once. The hunter's gun went off, bullet grazing Maya's shoulder instead of her head. Alexandra moved with impossible speed, taking advantage of the hunter's momentary distraction. And Maya's skin, where the blessed silver touched it, began to glow with a light that somehow matched Alexandra's fever warmth. Alexandra reached them in a blur of motion, tearing the gun away with one hand while the other closed around the hunter's throat. Maya had a moment to see genuine fear replace scientific certainty in those metallic eyes. Then Alexandra twisted, and the hunter's neck broke with a sound like justice. The automated weapons clattered to the ground, their blessed ammunition spent. Silence fell in the abandoned church, broken only by Maya's ragged breathing, and the sizzle of silver against both eternal and transforming flesh.
Maya,
Alexandra's voice carried pain and fear, and something deeper than both. He reached for her chains, then hesitated as he saw the way the silver left faint traces of light on her skin. Nothing like the burning agony it caused him, but undeniable evidence of change.
I never meant for this to happen.
The silver.
Maya said, looking at her wrists where the chains had left marks that glowed like starlight.
It burns, but differently, like touching something too warm rather than truly harmful.
She met his eyes.
When I tried to help you with your wounds that night, your blood.
Alexandra's hands shook slightly as he broke her chains, his fever warmth wrapping around her like a shield he couldn't quite help creating.
Maya,
You're hurt.
She reached for his shoulder where blessed silver still burned, but he caught her hands.
It will heal.
His eyes searched her face, midnight dark with desperate hope.
You're sure you're not injured? The silver truly doesn't burn.
Maya started to answer, then stopped. The hunter's words echoed in her mind. How his fever warmth would slowly change your very nature. How each touch brings you closer to becoming like him.
Alexandra.
She forced herself to meet his gaze.
The hunter said, he said you were changing me, that your touch, your fever warmth, that it was corrupting me somehow, making me something other than human.
Pain crossed his features, not from the silver burning his shoulder, but from something deeper.
Maya!
Just tell me the truth.
Her voice shook slightly.
Please. After everything, I need to know. Are you turning me into something else? Something like you?
Maya, I swear to you.
Alexandra's voice shook with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. Fear. Not of the hunter or blessed silver, but of losing her trust.
I never meant for this to happen. I would never force this choice on anyone, especially not you.
She looked at her wrists again, where the silver chains had left traces of starlight on her skin.
But it is happening, isn't it? I'm changing.
The early stages only.
He reached for her, then stopped himself, as if afraid his fever warmth might accelerate the process.
It's not irreversible, not yet.
Maya caught his hesitating hand, feeling how his eternal heat resonated with something new awakening in her blood.
Tell me everything.
Alexandra's other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing patterns that felt like ancient script against her skin.
In the beginning, when the temples still stood, transformation was a choice, a calling. Those who showed potential would spend years in preparation, slowly withdrawing from sunlight as their bodies adapted.
Like your mother?
Maya whispered.
Yes,
His fever warmth flared with memory.
the priests understood that such a profound change required absolute certainty. Until the final step was taken, there was always a path back to the light.
Maya's pulse quickened, still human enough to race, but with a new awareness of its rhythm.
What path?
Sunlight.
Alexandra's eyes held centuries of knowledge.
Pure UV radiation cleanses the infection from the blood, as long as no eternal blood has been consumed. A few weeks of careful exposure, and you would be fully human again.
That's why the temples were open to the sky.
Maya realized.
Why the ziggurats had those broad steps in the sun.
They were paths of choice.
His thumb stilled against her cheek.
Each morning, initiates would decide again, step into shadow or return to light. Some spent years walking that edge before making their final choice.
Maya thought of the photographs in her darkroom, of moments caught between light and shadow.
And if they chose light?
They returned to their mortal lives carrying wisdom but not transformation.
Alexandra's voice turned gentle.
Just as you can, if that's what you want.
If that's what I want.
Maya repeated softly. She studied his face, this eternal creature who'd rather lose her to sunlight than take away her choice.
How long do I have to decide?
A year or more, before the changes become too deep for sunlight to reverse.
His fever warmth pulsed with barely contained emotion.
But Maya, you have to understand, I never intended.
She pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping his words.
I know. I can feel the truth of it.
She smiled slightly.
Apparently, early-stage vampirism comes with some interesting perceptive abilities.
His laugh held equal parts relief and tension.
Another gift from the temples. The ability to sense truth was considered essential for those making such a profound choice.
Maya let her hand drift to his shoulder, where blessed silver still burned his eternal flesh. The wound resonated with something in her changing blood, calling to her in ways she didn't yet understand.
It hurts you,
She said softly,
It will heal.
but he couldn't quite hide his wince as she touched near the injury.
Maya, about the choice.
Shh.
She leaned closer, letting her newly heightened senses explore the changes in herself, in him, in the very air between them.
First, let me help with this.
Maya,
I may not be ready to choose between sun and shadow,
She said firmly.
but I am ready to stop you from suffering needlessly. Now hold still and let me see what I can do.
The implications hung between them, heavy with possibility. Maya could feel Alexandra holding himself carefully still, refusing to influence her choice, even as his fever warmth reached for her like a lodestone finding true north.
A year,
She said thoughtfully, letting her hand linger on his healed shoulder.
to walk the temple steps each morning, to choose between sun and shadow.
yes.
His voice carried centuries of careful control.
And I swear to you, whatever you choose,
Will be my choice.
She finished.
Not yours, not the hunters, not even the temples. My choice. Made with clear eyes and free will.
Something ancient and vulnerable crossed his features.
even if you choose the sun,
Maya felt her newly enhanced senses catalogue every detail of his expression. The hope he tried to hide, the fear he couldn't quite mask, the love he wouldn't voice lest it sway her decision.
Even then,
She said softly.
though somehow I suspect these next few weeks will teach me more about light and shadow than any temple priest could have imagined.
The church's remaining stained glass caught the last rays of sunset, painting them both in colours that meant something different to Maya's changing vision. She felt Alexandra's fever warmth wrap around her like a promise, like a question, like everything they weren't saying yet. Time enough for that. Time enough for choices and consequences, for sunlight and shadow, for all the possibilities blooming in her transforming blood. For now, she simply let herself feel, the last edges of humanity mixing with the first whispers of something eternal, creating something entirely new in the spaces between heartbeats. Chapter 13. Time Exposure. Maya stood on the Monteleone's balcony, watching the last rays of sunset paint the quarter in shades of possibility. 3 weeks had passed since the hunter's attack, each dawn bringing the same choice: step into sunlight or deeper into shadow. She had chosen both. Her changing blood had awakened to the ancient wisdom of the temple priests, showing her why they had spent years walking the path between worlds. Like them, she had chosen to embrace this transitional state, following the old ways until she was ready for her final choice. This was how it had been meant to be. Not a rushed transformation, but a gradual awakening. Each morning she would greet the sun, letting its light maintain her connection to the mortal world. Each night she would embrace the shadows, letting Alexandra's fever warmth guide her deeper into eternal mysteries. The hotel had adapted its spaces to match her unique state, creating rooms that held both sunlight and shadow in perfect balance. Even now, the balcony caught the day's last light while sheltering her in cooling darkness.
you're thinking too hard again.
Alexandra's voice came from behind her, his fever warmth wrapping around her like a familiar caress.
I can practically hear the gears turning.
Maya smiled without turning, letting her enhanced senses drink in his presence.
Just appreciating the view. The way light changes everything it touches.
His arms slid around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The contact sent shivers through her transforming flesh. Not quite human anymore, not quite eternal, but somehow perfect in its liminality.
Speaking of changes,
He murmured against her hair.
you're glowing again.
She was. Her skin had taken on a subtle luminescence in the weeks since the hunter's attack, as if her body had learned to hold both sunlight and shadow. Alexandra's fever warmth made the glow brighten wherever he touched her, their unique energies resonating like paired frequencies.
Your fault.
She said, turning in his arms to face him.
You and your impossible heat.
His smile held centuries of wanting.
I seem to recall someone choosing to walk the edge between temperatures.
His hands traced patterns on her back that felt like ancient spells.
Someone who refused to fully embrace either fire or frost.
Someone who wanted everything.
Maya let her fingers find the place where blessed silver had burned him, now healed but still carrying traces of her healing touch.
Sun and shadow, light and dark, time and eternity.
Greedy thing.
But his voice held wonder rather than censure. His fever warmth flared as she pressed closer, her transforming blood singing in harmony with his eternal heat. The hotel chose that moment to dim its lights, creating an intimate atmosphere that made Maya laugh.
Still playing matchmaker?
Always.
Alexandra's smile turned predatory in the best way.
Though in this case,
He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he kissed her with centuries of pent-up passion, his fever warmth igniting something wild and wonderful in her changing blood. Maya felt herself responding with equal hunger, not for blood or shadow, but for this impossible being who had shown her how to balance between worlds. The hotel's presence rippled with approval as Alexandra lifted her, carrying her toward the suite's bedroom with supernatural grace. Maya wound her fingers in his hair, marveling at how her luminescent skin painted patterns of light across his eternal flesh.
beautiful.
He breathed against her neck, his hands leaving trails of fire wherever they touched.
My impossible light.
She answered with actions rather than words, letting her transforming nature show her exactly how to touch him, where to taste, what would make his careful control shatter into starlight. Time lost all meaning as they explored each other's dual natures. Alexandra's fever warmth wrapped around her like solar flares, while her luminescent skin turned their joining into an eclipse, shadow and light, creating something entirely new in the spaces between heartbeats. The hotel maintained a discreet distance, but Maya felt its shy satisfaction in the way the lights dimmed to their lowest setting, in how the shadows gathered to create perfect privacy, in the soft music that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Afterward, Maya lay in Alexandra's arms, watching her glow paint impossible patterns across his fever-warm skin. Each point of contact between them resonated with possibility, not just physical pleasure, but the deep rightness of finding exactly where one belonged.
You're thinking again.
Alexandra murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Maya traced the planes of his chest, marveling at how her light seemed to sink into his eternal flesh.
Just appreciating how everything led here. All the choices, all the fears, all the moments caught between worlds.
His fever warmth pulsed with contentment.
Any regrets about choosing this middle path?
Maya lifted herself onto one elbow, studying his face in the gentle light she cast.
Only that I wasted so much time being afraid of possibility.
She smiled.
Though I suppose eternity gives us plenty of chances to make up for lost moments.
Eternity?
His hand stilled on her skin.
But you haven't fully transformed. You're still walking the edge.
And that's exactly where I want to stay, for now.
She let her fingers find his pulse, slower than human, faster than truly eternal.
Following the temple path, learning the mysteries properly, taking the time to understand both worlds before making my final choice.
Alexandra's smile bloomed like sunrise.
Everything that matters.
Maya answered by kissing him again, letting her luminescent skin paint them both impossibilities. Outside, the quarter's bells began to toll midnight, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy creating their own magic, their own perfect exposure between time and eternity. For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly complete. That hollow ache she'd carried for so long now filled with something deeper than mortal love and wider than eternal time. She had finally found where she belonged, not in light or shadow alone, but in the sacred space between heartbeats where both worlds met.